Hello, my name is Vincent Raza, and today I'm going to be talking about the war on drugs. The war on drugs was started by Richard Nixon in 1971. Through the years, it has gained many followers, and even today, people still believe in this war. Well, I'm going to explain to you how and why this war failed, and how to reverse the effects it had on the U.S. In June 1971, Richard Nixon officially declared a war on drugs, stating that drug abuse was the public enemy number one. That was from History.com, War on Drugs. One of the first actions taken by Nixon was mandatory prison sentencing for drug crimes. He also instated the DEA, or the Drug Enforcement Administration, in 1973. The DEA was funded millions of dollars to incarcerate people based on drug-related offenses. The Controlled Substance Act of 1970 was created to classify drugs based on their medical use and potential for abuse. They were classified in 5 schedules, where Schedule 5 drugs like Schedule 5 drugs were drugs like where Schedule 5 includes drugs like cough medicine or over-the-counter drugs, and Schedule 1 includes LSD, marijuana, heroin, and cocaine. In the last decade or so, public support for the war on drugs has diminished immensely. From 2009 to 2013, most states in the U.S. have laxed their drug laws. In 2010, Congress passed the Fair Sentencing Act, which targeted cocaine-related sentencing. Lastly, many states have decided to legalize different substances. All of this shows that the war on drugs is still continuing, but is being fought on all sides now. Why did it fail? Well, there were 3 policies for the war on drugs at the start. It was meant to reduce drug-related crime, decrease disease and overdose, and it was used as an effective means of dismantling criminal enterprises. All of these had been proven to be ineffective, but how? The first main point of the war on drugs was to reduce drug-related crime. According to Betsy Earle and her article, Ending the War on Drugs by the Numbers, 1/5 of the incarcerated population is serving time on drug charges. Black Americans are 6 times more likely to be charged with drug-related offenses than white Americans, despite the equal substance usage. And since 1990, crime rates started to go down, and experts say that 75 to 100% of these reductions are due to factors other than incarceration. The war didn't help decrease drug-related crime, it only made drug-related use illegal. They used these laws against colored people for the sole purpose of dismantling and defaming their groups. According to Christopher Coyne and Abigail Hall, they say that in one study of New York City homicides, researchers found that while only 7.5% of murders committed during the period analyzed were related to the physical effects of drug use, 40% were related to the exigencies of the illicit market system. Not only did the war fail to decrease crime, there was also an increase of the underground market. There was an increase because of the underground markets that were created. The second reason the war was started was to decrease disease and overdose. This decreasing overdose or misuse of substances other than the is another thing that the war on drugs addressed, but didn't help. According to Betsy Earle, in the first 2 weeks after their release from prison, individuals are almost 13 times more likely to die than the general population. The leading cause of death within these individuals was overdose. The war caused an increase in incarcerated individuals based on drug charges, which caused an increase in misuse. Here's a graph showing an increase in overdose deaths per 100,000 people in the U.S. As you can see, from 1980 to 2008, the amount of people overdosing increased by almost 6 times. The third and final reason for the war on drugs was for an effective means of dismantling criminal enterprises. This was Nixon's sole purpose of starting the war. He disguised this war so that he could take down the anti-war left and black community during the 70s. Dan Daum wrote a magazine article some time ago where he interviewed John Earl Richmond, who was one of Nixon's policy chiefs. Earl Richmond said to Daum, "You want to know what this was really about? The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies: the anti-war left and black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. John Earl Richmond proved with that interview that the whole reason they started the war on drugs was to win Nixon's campaign and keep him in office. With that being said, how can we really help the war on drugs? Well, the easiest answer is rehabilitation and treatment. The Drug Policy Alliance is a non-profit organization that is helping drug abuse one step at a time. Their most notable policy is rehabilitation over incarceration. They are creating treatment and rehab centers all over the US and are helping drug-related criminals. The war on drugs was meant to decrease crime rates and reduce misuse. But in the beginning, it was meant to infiltrate and meet enterprises. For the most part, it failed at everything it stood for. Crime rates inversely increased, misuse after incarceration was a problem, and Nixon only started this war to take down groups of people that were against his policies. So, in order to salvage what he did, the US is starting to lax drug laws, legalize certain drugs, and is funding treatment and rehab centers. Everything takes time, and this war is just getting started.